Hi everyone, welcome to this tutorial. So we're going to paint this door handle, a little bit of the door, and then we have that lock on the bottom. And the main thing to me are always shadows. Shadows are really important. Here is the reference image right next to my painting. So you can see like how I translated it with the watercolors. So I didn't do the door like exactly as you see in the reference image. I kind of went with my own thing. I didn't want to do too many details other than focusing on that door. Before I start painting, I always line up these colors on the paper and I just kind of grab them thinking what colors I'm going to use. And the next thing is I squeeze them onto the palette if I need new colors or just more colors. And then I dilute these colors with water. I dilute these colors with water depending on like how am I going to paint something. So if I'm going to paint something wet on wet, the colors are going to be diluted into a consistency of either half and half or heavy cream-like ratio. I'm referring to dairy. But in this case here, I am going to paint the door wet on dry. Everything will be mostly painted wet on dry. So I want actually to have a little more water mixed with that paint. And as I will be grabbing the paint and placing it over the paper as I'm painting, then of course I will have way more water on my brush. This is the opposite of what I do when I paint wet on wet. It's very different. So this is a good practice. Generally, like I think it's wet on wet is considered harder, but to me it's actually not. It's much easier. With wet on dry is when paper dries faster and you actually have to be really quick if you want to add another color on top of the layer you just created. Here it's different. That's why I consider these tutorials with doors, windows, and stuff like that much easier. Actually much easier, much better for beginners, because when you paint that door, so the background, it doesn't matter if you create a bloom or hard edges. It's actually more important to use the correct ratio between water and paint. Here what I'm doing there is I created like a muddy mix blend of colors and I didn't like it. It became too muddy. So I wiped it with a paper towel and I'm creating now a cleaner mix. What happened was I had like too much of the quin red in there and maybe I had indigo there earlier, but it became like too muddy and I just decided to wipe it with a paper towel, clean that area of the palette, and then just dilute cobalt green again with water and then cobalt turquoise or the turquoise blue. So I have this large wash brush which is 1.5 inches wide brush. And why am I not using like my golden toque 3/4 size brush right now? It's because I want to have like a wider coverage, larger coverage with the brush right away. That's because paper dries much faster here because I'm not pre-wetting anything. I'm painting wet on dry. So of course, anything I apply there onto the paper, wet on dry, it's going to really dry in seconds, very fast. That's why like wet on wet is much easier in my opinion, which is why I always like try to teach mostly about wet on wet. But this is, in my opinion, much easier, much better for beginners, especially because again, we're applying these colors and we're blending them on the paper. It's okay if you see a bloom happening. It's okay if you skip an area and you have like a paper white area. You don't need to fill it, just leave it. It's more important about paying attention to the ratio between water and paint. I'm going to refer to dairy again because that's what I use, the water-like ratio, milk-like ratio, half and half, or heavy cream. I have plenty of posts about this, by the way, on Patreon and on YouTube too. So now I am using the 3/4 size brush, the flat 3/4 size brush, because I have a smaller area, so it's a thinner area there and I don't need to use a wide brush for that. So you want to use between water and milk-like ratio. Milk-like ratio in some areas mostly try to go lighter, because if you go lighter, that means you have more water and then the area won't dry as fast. Technically, I should kind of explain this better. Try to actually use more water with this because then you will have more time to go back to an area and then maybe add more color and so on. Because I shouldn't say like, okay, use only water like ratio, because then things won't dry as fast. They can still dry as fast if you don't have enough of that paint and water on your brush. So really it depends. It really depends.